why do you need adversity to be great? Say hello to my wife. I'm having what's known as a wardrobe malfunction. She is cutting my hair. This has been a dream of hers.
You've endeared me to your millions of viewers.
To humiliate me on the air.
I always cry even though it isn't allowed. So proud.
You make me want to be a better streamer.
A better streamer.
No, definitely not that. Do you need adversity to be great?
Your skill is you tee up your guests and you make them look, so good.
Yeah. Oh, such a good question. Gets me all fired up, man. Such a good interviewer. I'm ready to go. Jump to the screen. But no, like, so true.
They can't see I'm dancing by myself.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.
Well, hello, everybody. Oh, there's a strawberry frog behind me. I got a fright for a second. Hope you guys are well. It is Monday. I took a break. I didn't do a show yesterday. Did you miss me? Did you? Because I kind of missed you just a little bit. Just about a frog's leg. In distance, in girth. Of course I missed you, but I also enjoyed the ability to take a little bit of a break and recharge and re-energize. I posted a few photos to my Instagram, went for a run. I love seeing, it's almost like an interesting trend now where people are taking chalk and they're writing and creating murals on the ground. There was a lot of inspirational messages about COVID, and now I saw a whole set of illustrations and messages about Black Lives Matter. It was quite inspiring. And so, yeah, that was my weekend. How was your weekend? Did you have a good weekend? Do you feel a little bit more balanced? Because the world is completely out of whack, isn't it? The world is out of balance. But CoronaTV is here and the Strawberry Frog is here to help you find that sense of purpose and meaning and hope and positivity and optimism, all of the above. Let's say a few hellos. Mr. Bob Farnham, I missed you too, Bob. And Joey DeMont is here. And Dana is here. Dana Bentz is here all the way from LinkedIn. Dana, thank you. Dana, we have to, well, I saw you on the StreamYard show, on your show. What do I have to do to come on as a guest is the question. But more importantly, I've got to install my referral number, because who knows how many people I have sent StreamYard's way. I am an evangelist. I'm a StreamYard zealot. What a magnificent piece of software. I mean, this whole show is done through a piece of software, and it's allowed me to produce a show that looks almost professional. Can you imagine if I was reasonably competent, what I would be able to do? A wave to my brother, Alan Jaffe, and Jan. Jan, how could you not be here when Scott Goodson is on the show? There aren't many real leaders and visionaries and forces in our godforsaken business, but Scott Goodson is one of them. And so he is going to be coming onto the show shortly. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to talk about, right? Which is the author of UpRising, the founder and chairman of StrawberryFrog. Well, you know that. But let's also talk about, of course, I made the same mistake again, which is I didn't change next week's interviews to this week's interviews. Well, Saw Cold will join me for Corona cocktails tomorrow. I will be making a gin martini, shaken extra hard, with 3 olives and a little dry. And Saul, I don't know what he's going to be doing, but we will drink profusely as we rant and rave, and it's going to be awesome. And then we've got Henk and Rohit and William rounding off a week. It's a bit of an advertising heavy week, which is awesome, because William was one of the smarter, I don't even know what he wants to talk about, but he's certainly one of the smarter account planners that I've ever worked with. As always, please continue. If you like me, then like me. You know what I mean. Whether it's commenting, whether it's sharing, subscribing, your engagement powers my passion and also helps other people notice the show, or for the show to get noticed and I appreciate that, and I appreciate you. Today is Smile Power Day. It is National Smile Power Day. So smile, even if you've got to fake that smile, smile. It is infectious. You can't not smile and not feel just a little bit better. So there's a lot not to smile about, but when you are smiling, you are powerful and you are giving power to others. So do that. A whole bunch of birthdays. I can't go into them in too much detail, except to say to my Facebook friends who celebrated on Saturday, on Sunday, my LinkedIn colleagues, friends, peers, contacts, B2B, you know, not as much of a personal thing, but to all of you, happy birthday. And then, of course, the birthday boys and girls today, happy birthday to you guys. I hope that you are not celebrating alone. And if you are, well, we are not alone together. It is also Fat Blogging Day. Maybe I'm happy because I lost weight. I went from 193.8 pounds to 191 pounds. The pounds are flying off me. I don't know if they're flying off me, but from the beginning of quarantine, 200.7, I'm now at 191. My son's bar mitzvah is in 2 weeks and 2 days. My goal is to break 190 with a bit of luck and less Corona cocktails. I'll be at 187, which was my goal. This is weight loss by community. It's called Fat Blogging because, you know, there's nowhere to run and nowhere to hide because you will hold me accountable. And with that said, it is today's seated soliloquy. And today we're going to talk about cult. This is not American Horror Story Cult Edition. It is something slightly different. I mean, you guys know that I love playing with words or names. And today I want to focus actually on the word culture. It's a word that can be quite amorphous, ephemeral, ambiguous, or even amphibious. Clearly, someone had way too much fun today with big words and frogs. The dictionary definition, though, doesn't help us really understand this better. Culture, noun. The customs, arts, social institutions, and achievements of a particular nation, people, or other social group. Huh? Where's the passion? Where's the purpose? Where's the vision? Where's the beef? The company today that is built to suck is a company that has lost its soul, that has forgotten its purpose. It is a company whose culture is rotten to the core, or if that's too harsh for you, let's just say one that has become too diluted, watered down, or vanilla. What's missing is the cult component, cult in culture, the tangible or intangible magic that binds each and every employee together, that connects them and instills in them the same sheet music that they all sing from in perfect unison and perfect harmony. Except they're not really singing softly, are they? Unless, of course, that's their culture. Oftentimes, they're screaming at the top of their lungs, waving their tattooed arms or hands proudly, displaying the logo of the company they keep. There's a pride and a sense of belonging that energizes and empowers them to leap forward with intent, unwavering resolution, and complete and unconditional belief in a shared and greater objective, a collective mission, a common goal. That's the kind of culture we crave in business today, and what we need to strive to kindle, ignite, and sustain if we are to have any chance of survival. Cult, noun, a misplaced or excessive admiration for a particular person or thing. Now that is more like it. Wouldn't you agree? Well, now it's time to find out if somebody else agrees with the definition and the difference between cult and culture. Someone, I think, who lives this and breathes this and teaches us to understand in a creative context. It's time to bring on my guest, Scott Goodson. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Joseph. I totally am aligned with your soliloquy and your point about culture. It's very much like the wind. It's invisible, but we can feel it, especially when it's blowing in your direction against you. When it's behind you, it's great. If you're a sailor, you know what I'm talking about. But if the wind is, towards you, things become volatile. And when you're the CEO of a company and you're trying to navigate those waves in the wind, it can be very difficult and very difficult to survive, let alone become adaptive or innovative. So culture is a really important part of building, common destiny, common focus among all your employees and also among your consumers. Totally aligned.
So now let's take a small step backwards, which is for people that don't know the reference to, the strawberry frog behind me. And I will say, I mean, for me, it's, we haven't seen each other. We were joking earlier that it took a global pandemic for us to reconnect. But I have to tell you, like, they're few and far between the really great independent boutiques. And I say boutique as a compliment, an ultimate compliment, because, as you know, I wrote a book called Built to Suck. Let's see how big we get before we suck, before we go bad. Jay Scheitz, thank you. I would love for you to share your story of how you came to found this agency, why the name, and just bring us up to speed in terms of what you've been up to, because I've coveted you from afar. I've coveted the Strawberry Frog from afar. It really has been a light in an industry that sorely and surely needs that light.
I think it all started as a child. Someone told me this joke, how many Canadians does it take to screw in a light bulb? And it was like 3 or 4. It wasn't like 700. That I applied to the whole marketing approach, which, in the old days, if you had a large brand, you needed a huge bureaucracy to do a whole marketing campaign. And I just thought that felt completely wrong. I thought it was a fib. I thought it was a myth. And I was very fortunate to grow up in Sweden. I started my advertising marketing career in Stockholm, Sweden. And I worked for an excellent company there. And the client that we were working for at the time was Ericsson Mobile Phones, which was at the time 60% of the world's mobile phone market. And I spent 5 years of my life traveling the world with the CMO, launching mobile phone first in Eastern Europe, Poland, and the Czech Republic. We did Germany, we did France, we did Spain, then we did Greece, and then Turkey and Thailand, and Australia, New Zealand, Brazil, and then eventually the US. And it was all done by a really tiny group of people. It wasn't your bureaucratic, very expensive, slow-moving advertising agency. It was a very small boutique firm in Stockholm. And years later, I realized that Swedes are extremely good at logistics and organization. So I think they had some cultural benefit to the way they were able to organize. But nevertheless, Scandinavia, actually, if you look at the European market, you can basically draw a line at the Ruhr Valley and just say everything below there, they need to have a bureaucratic organization to do global marketing. They need global agencies. So French clients, Italian clients, Swiss clients to some extent. But everything above there, because organizations are matrix driven, they tend not to force their CEOs in the countries to adapt to the global agency. So they tend to have independent boutiques. So Scandinavia, Germany, the Netherlands, they are much more aligned with the sort of independent, smaller organization. So I grew up in that world, and I spent 10 years. I ended up owning an agency in Stockholm, and we had a lot of the big Swedish multinationals that were expanding from Sweden internationally, and they preferred a small team of people that they trusted and could replicate successful marketing programs from one country to the next and so forth. They didn't like, you know, the big Y&R or the big JWT or the big BBDO. And, you know, there are some exceptions to the rule, like Mercedes uses BBDO, but that was from their merger with Chrysler. Chrysler actually had BBDO as a client and kind of brought that culture into Mercedes. But before that, Mercedes really did have one independent firms in many countries, just like BMW and Audi and others and Volkswagen do. So that's really where I started. I started my career in Sweden and decided to start StrawberryFrog in the late 90s in Amsterdam. Moved from Sweden to Amsterdam because the European clients that we worked with in Stockholm, they were reluctant to fly all the way north to Sweden. You know, 2.5-hour flight from Amsterdam is too much, and forget about the French and forget about the Italians. We did work with some Swiss clients with Swatch, but anyway, we had to get lower down on the continent. So we opened up StrawberryFrog in 1999 in Amsterdam. Because of the geographical location, because of the scene in Amsterdam was really cool at the time. Wieden and Kennedy had opened an office there, not because really the reason was because Nike had their headquarters there for accounting reasons. The Dutch market is a great place to set up a holding company. So Nike was open there, and then you had Wieden open, and then quite quickly afterwards, Adidas followed suit, because in those days, Adidas used to follow Nike and try to lure away their talent. And then, of course, 180 started in Amsterdam. So we were the third agency, independent, to come into Amsterdam after Wieden and 180. And it just was a wave of creativity, and people came from all over the world. I mean, some extraordinary talent from South Africa, from the UK, from all over Europe, from the United States. We had terrific talent who came to work with us at StrawberryFrog from the US, from Canada. It really became a global creative hotspot. And we just, you know, right space, right time. And we, you know, we called it StrawberryFrog because coming back from this experience in Sweden, we believe that smaller independent boutiques could rival the big corporate networks and do what big clients need and want, but just do it differently than those big, expensive corporate agencies. And it proved to be true.
You know, it strikes me that when you think about how inextricably linked and connected the creative world, the agency world, is to the corporate world, for example, Procter & Gamble with falling or declining quarterly earnings, well, that impacted WPP, the holding company, which impacted the agencies. So as the large corporation struggles or suffers, you know, particularly in certain industries like retail, there is a cascading or a domino effect. But now when I think about it, I think that what really happened was these small creative boutiques grew up or had to grow in order to satisfy and service these conglomerates and these multinationals. And in doing so, the key word is dilution, right? Dilution of creative resources, dilution of culture on both sides. Maybe it's a good thing now as we see the holding companies struggling, as we see large corporations struggling. Maybe at least it's a good thing for creativity, recognizing that we don't have to be big to be better, right? It's not about quantity anymore in this world, at least it doesn't appear to be, as opposed to something that I think we both feel strongly about, which is quality.
I think you're right. You're right. You're bang on about the fact that the corporate culture is evolving. So the corporate culture, you know, up until the 1990s was about efficiency and executional excellence. And in order to do that well, you needed a corporate advertising agency, because that fulfilled, you know, the expectations of the leadership that, you know, we're a big company, we need a big agency. I think it changed in the early 2000s during the economic recession, where the pressure was put on corporations to start to be much more enterprise focused and to introduce entrepreneurship, which meant more innovation, more reliance on a small group of talented people, not the bureaucratic networks. And that made room for people like Strawberry Frog. That allowed us to come in. I'll never forget, it was a classic scene. It was in the early 2000s, and Capgemini merged with Ernst & Young, and they were having a big, huge pitch in Paris. And the global headquarters of Capgemini were in one of the big mansions that were built around the L'Arc de Triomphe by Napoleon, which he gave to all of his marshals. And so they owned one of those buildings, and that's where Serge Comte, the owner of Capgemini, had his office, and all the management were there. So we were the last agency to present, and it was myself, one other person, and at the time Will Collin, who has gone on to do other things. But and we were watching. First came in Havas, and there was like 30 guys all in 3-piece suits, and then the guy at the back carried the deck, and it was like 600 pages, and there was then it was the next big corporate French agency, and then we went in. And it was 3 of us, and we decided, because we saw they're going with their decks, that we would shorten our deck to 10 slides. And we went in and made the presentation, and the first thing they said was, "Thank God it wasn't a 2-hour presentation." They were so exhausted. And they loved our idea, which was a movement. We basically said, the brief they'd given to us was they felt that Capgemini had become irrelevant, and that people didn't know what they did. And they were not being considered in the same league as Accenture or McKinsey or other consulting firms. So we did some research and asked people, here's a document from Capgemini, can you read what they do? And then we asked them to plot, to look at 3 pictures and tell us which was Capgemini. One was, really good looking Harvard grads. One was a room with broken furniture. And the third, I can't remember. And everyone pointed to the broken furniture as Capgemini. So I went into the room and I said, it's not about telling people what you do. You're completely irrelevant. People think you're old-fashioned and you're broken furniture. You've got to do a movement to show people that you're relevant. So we came up with a movement which was called Defy the Economy. And we created this concept of the economy being a, let's say, mentally challenged, deranged individual who one day was up, manic, and the next day was down, and complete volatility. You could never really understand where the economy was. And the whole idea of defying the economy, to do that, you had to build an adaptive enterprise. And that's what we packaged. We created this concept of the adaptive enterprise, which they loved. So we ended up winning that whole thing. And it was really the day I realized that this idea of a small boutique challenging the big corporations was true. Because if you can do that in France, you can do it anywhere.
I mean, it seems, first of all, our economy right now, that mentally deranged economy, it's back. So yeah, let's call Capgemini or call Strawberry Frog. Can you fix this economy, Scott? I can't take the manic. I can't take the highs and the lows. But actually, something you said when you're telling the story, there's a simplicity about it, and it makes me think almost in an endearing and an affectionate way to watching John Hamm in Mad Men, Don Draper, just the simplicity of the elegance, something that is just succinct. Instead of going in with a deck that's so big and overwhelm and overload with data, it is bringing us back to that moment of truth. The idea, the insight. It's what seems to have gone AWOL in our business right now. Just the essence of creativity. I keep coming back to that, and yet, you don't focus on that. You're not mentioning the word agency. You're not mentioning the word creativity. You're talking about movement and culture, and you describe yourselves as a cultural movement firm. That's fascinating to me. So, talk a little bit more about that, because there's a clear difference.
Well, I think, significant change as we see in our world today, you don't have to go very far to see what social pressure means. Like if you walk into a store and you're not wearing a mask, everyone's going to give you some pretty dark, heavy looks. If you're not social distancing, you're going to get some heavy, some nasty looks. People don't realize that social pressure is probably the greatest force that we face out there that can change behavior and motivate people to do things. And a cultural movement is in effect social pressure focused. And if you basically, at StrawberryFrog, we believe that the most significant change comes by applying the principles of societal movements and do it in such a way that you can move people to join you because they believe in the stand that you're making, because it aligns with what they already believe in, and you're able to mobilize the masses, and you can institutionalize new norms. You can get them to participate, and you can sell products while you're doing that. You can also transform your organization, because if you're the CEO of a company and you want to be more innovative, cultural change is extremely difficult. Think about all the companies today whose employees sit there and think this company's best years are behind us. I really want to work for the cool, hot, Silicon Valley guys. And then the CEO comes in and their job is to take, a mulch factory and turn it into an innovation factory. And in order to do that, it needs completely new types of behaviors from leaders and employees that are complete, opposite of corporate culture, which is all about, operating the company as efficiently and as perfectly as possible. Added to that is the fact that real power today is not coming from the editor of Vogue. It's coming from thousands of Instagram bloggers, fashionistas. So the power is down at the grassroots. It's in the middle of the organization. It's in the bottom of the organization. You cannot change a company through a top-down mandate that's, issuing compliance orders, because culture is really a part of, the hearts of your people. It's what they are passionate about. It's what they share with their friends. It's how they, together with their friends, care about what they're doing. It's not about this company is telling me to do something, therefore I will do it. It's doing it in a way where people say, we are doing this because this is relevant to all of us, and this will benefit all of us. And that generates optimism among all these fellow employees. It generates trust. It inspires creativity. It inspires leadership. If you follow the new leader of Verizon, Hans Vesterberg, he has a culture that is established inside his organization where he'll walk into meetings and he'll sit somewhere in the middle of the table and not say a word, because he wants other leaders to rise up. He wants to distribute leadership, because he realizes in today's world it can't be up to one guy. It's up to the thousands of leaders that he can grow who can make important decisions in order to grow the company. It's the same with consumers. You need to build a framework in which consumers can engage. So the idea of advertising, the idea of having an agency, to me is completely over. It's about a company that can solve business problems by both internally helping to transform companies, helping chief HR officers, helping CEOs, chief operating officers, change the culture, change the behavior of employees, deal with big issues like some that we're going to get into today, like physical well-being, financial well-being, mental well-being. These are huge issues that employees will face over the next months and years coming out of the coronavirus. This cannot be managed through top-down mandates. It has to be managed through movement.
And as I put on the screen, you wrote a book called UpRising: How to Build a Brand and Change the World by Sparking Cultural Movements. And I think, immediately I had questions in my mind thinking about purpose, thinking about corporates speaking up or staying silent during these turbulent times, during these times of these marches and protests. But I thought it would be a good opportunity to say that you're going to continue this thought in our Zoom after show where Scott and Ali will address mental health amongst employees during this period. But you might be thinking, who is Ali? Well, this is Ali. Let's bring her onto the show. Welcome to the show, Ali. Who is Ali?
Thanks so much, Joseph. I'm really glad to join you. I work with Scott at StrawberryFrog. I'm in the brand strategy field and work on a few of our big accounts, and also have had the pleasure of writing with Scott a couple of times.
Exactly, and you guys wrote a piece that appeared in Harvard Business Review called "Shift Your Organization from Panic to Purpose." And before I ask you guys to just provide the context for it, the one thing that I was thinking of is, you know, it's funny because corporates and brands love to talk. They love to talk, whether they have anything to say or not, whether it's compelling or not. And then somehow, when times get really tricky and tough, cats got their tongue and they don't say anything. And then I think about all the brands right now that are struggling to find their voice. One that just jumps to mind now is Starbucks, where they've reversed their position. And I'm a big fan of, for the most part, Starbucks and the work that they've done, and sometimes when they've made mistakes, how they've admitted it. But I think it's been very interesting how they've reversed a position in terms of their employees coming to work wearing Black Lives Matter, you know, T-shirts or badges, etc. So I wonder if you guys could talk a little bit, you know, about that, or maybe you just want to hold it and set up the article and then come back to answering that question.
Well, I'll let Ali speak because she's very eloquent and passionate about this. I'll just set it up by saying we just completed the first empirical study on purpose brands called the Purpose Power Index, which completely upends the list of the world's best brands, and it's measured through 17,500 consumer responses on brand purpose. And I just wanted to talk about the point you made about toothless brand purpose. You know, companies that claim to have a purpose that, you know, is somewhere hidden in a PowerPoint and never really gets activated. What Ali and I are here to talk about today is the importance of having a purpose, but also equally important, if not more important, is activating it and how you activate it. And the brand and the Purpose Power Index shows you the brands that are successful are the ones that have activated that purpose very effectively.
For sure.
And yeah, so I'll hand it to you, Ali, to go.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point to lead with, because the Starbucks example, Joseph, that you just used, it's an amazing moment where the culture has just outstripped brands. And it's kind of, at the one level, it's a fabulous demonstration of how powerful culture is, right? It's a rare moment when we've seen cultural attitudes and perceptions and views shift in a matter of weeks. And it shows you what that can amount to for brands, because all of a sudden they're caught flat-footed, they're caught a little bit behind the 8 ball. And I think the whole point of purpose thinking and movement thinking is to really get on the right side of that from an internal perspective. So the logic of your brand, what's its history, what's its equity, but where can it go in the future, instead of sort of waiting to be in a reactive mode. I mean, listen, when reacting is called for, brands should react, but you've already taken a step back, or you're starting a step back. Whereas if you've had a chance to clarify what you're about and where your brand is headed, it can be an enormous advantage in a time like this.
I have to say that what I like about the way you've set this up, right, from panic to purpose, is that, you know, we often, almost like the word I was using in my soliloquy, which is culture, it's amorphous and it's ephemeral, and we're not quite sure what it is. It just seems fuzzy. But purposes can be so overused or misunderstood. But you've almost positioned it as a process. It is a path to purpose. It is a process. It is a journey, but it's also very fluid and dynamic. And that's why I love this idea of movement, which is it's not static. It's changing. It's always changing. It's always moving. It's always evolving. That's how we move forward.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's correct.
For sure. Well, if it's a good time, we can transition a little bit to the article itself. Does that make sense, Joseph?
If I just do my little magic wand like that, I could give you step 1.
Ah, perfect. Okay. So essentially, the place that this piece started from was seeing so many brands and companies and leaders understandably in a panic mode. Like in a matter of weeks, this crisis had brought markets and categories to the brink and over a cliff. And there was a sort of a frozen posture, not knowing what to do, or just frantic measures of self-preservation. And the point of the piece was to say, listen, if this has brought life as we know it to a standstill, what is this the right time for? What is this actually a perfect time for? It's a perfect time for asking, what could your business look like? What could it do if it had a purpose at its core? Because all of the daily hum and drum and thrum of business had come to a stop. So that first point you've highlighted there, the meaningful pause, is let's take advantage of this moment when we can't do business as usual and figure out, like, we really haven't had a chance to think in the silence of all of those supply chains and all of those ordering systems that have come to a grinding halt. What could we be? What could we do if we had purpose there? And so that really brings us to the second step.
And just before you go into step 2, a quick follow-up question, which is how many companies do you think are really doing this, reflecting, introspecting, asking the tough questions, even going through this catharsis in terms of being able to not only take the time to pause, but to attach that meaning, that ability to say, perhaps we weren't exactly going in the direction that we had hoped to or that we originally intended to?
I actually think a lot of companies have taken it up in that way. I mean, many by necessity, but I don't have numbers, but we use some examples in the course of the piece to show that whole categories like journalism and education have reshaped how they interact with their constituencies in a matter of weeks. So it's been quite thoroughgoing, and I think maybe more so than we might have predicted when we first published this piece in late April. But I think maybe to some of the discussion we're having earlier, some of the large, bureaucratically driven corporations that are global and hierarchies that are quite entrenched, that's no doubt a harder reorientation. Some that are used to disruption or born from disruption are perhaps, in a better position to embrace it. So step 2 is really about overcoming the inertia that a lot of companies have around purpose. And, our informal just experience over many courses of many careers in the agency is you start to work with new clients and they do have a purpose. And sometimes you'll get it played back pretty close to what it is. And sometimes people can't really remember what it is and they have to go dig it out of a deck. And there's a reason for that, which is that business was humming along pretty well without really doing much with the purpose. And in fact, Scott referenced the Purpose Power Index. That is an original piece of research we launched just at the end of 2019. And the sort of, if I had to pull out one number from that study that really floored us, it was that just 27% of consumers can name a purpose-driven brand. So when you think of pretty much every brand out there has a purpose, and just over a quarter of people can even think of one. So there's clearly a disconnect in terms of what the intention is on the part of brands and leaders and companies and how it's landing out in the culture. And we think that the first important thing to think through is really to get past that inertia, that it's been there. You've been going along in the same way for so long, and things have worked well without it. Well, here we are, stopped in our tracks. Get past the inertia. This is, if there's ever been a time when leaders can lead boldly with purpose, now is it.
Right, and the thing that strikes me there is the company might have a purpose, but its consumers and maybe constituencies and community isn't aware of what that purpose is. It hasn't either been communicated, or maybe just hasn't really kind of filtered its way into lives beyond just the function of buying goods and services and consuming product. And that probably then, once that inertia has been overcome, now the movement occurs, which is step 3, bring purpose into the future. That's right. And that invisibility of purpose that you're talking about, Joseph, has 2 faces, right? And one is the internal face, where oftentimes the staff and the employees themselves don't know what the purpose is or why they have it. And as well as the external world, where consumers have no idea. They just haven't heard of your purpose and wouldn't believe that you act on it. But right. But to bring it into the future, I think the point of this section of the article is really to say, you know, in another moment, in another season, if one were going to do a dedicated purpose exercise, you would probably focus a lot on roots and origin stories and the business fundamentals. I think what this crisis probably brings with it is a very different approach, where we now need a purpose that leads us forward into this changed landscape. And it's, so not only is it an opportunity to sort of find that purpose, but it's an opportunity to match it, adapt it, bring it forward into this world that has never really been in greater need of purpose-driven brands. It's interesting. I just think of the analogy, right? Bring purpose into the future. And I'm wondering, is purpose and the corporation, are they hand in hand, or is purpose leading, in fact, the corporation? What role does purpose play? Is it a Sherpa? Is it a, you know, or is it more of a inextricably interconnected, if you will? I'm sure that varies from company to company, but I love the idea of purpose leading. And I think when it's done right, it can be one of the most important filters that leadership uses to evaluate business decisions. If you've got a purpose that really shows what you're about and why you're there in the world and what you want to accomplish, you know, as a leader, you're going to face choices every day. How do you allocate resources? Who do you hire? Where do you want to open? What kinds of markets do you want to expand? All of those decisions have a lot of factors, but if your purpose is clear and is fully sort of metabolized through your organization, that's going to be one of the first things one of the first bells you ring when you're looking to make those decisions.
I tend to think that, you know, purpose is a bit like having a rudder under a sailing ship, where the wind is the culture blowing either with you or against you, and you know, without that rudder, you're going tacking to the left, you're tacking to the right, you're really tacking everywhere. But with a rudder, you're able to sort of aim for a specific destination and get there. I think when you have a purpose and you're the leader of an organization, you really can lead without fear. I think you need a purpose gives you security, it gives you stability to make decisions in good times and in crises, that allows you to be fearless as opposed to fearful. If you have no purpose, then you're constantly making it up as you're going along. You know, we're working at the moment with Truist, which is a new financial institution that's the merger of BB&T and SunTrust, and their purpose is building better lives in communities. So when the economic devastation hit, the first thing that we launched for them was something called Truist Cares, and it was a program to help communities, because that's the purpose. It was something they just immediately went to because that was their purpose. It almost pre-focuses you on solutions that are in line with your organization's long-term why, the reason for being, that is beyond generating profits. It's your reason to do good in society. And I fully believe that by doing good, companies these days not only satisfy the business objectives of the business roundtable that say that stakeholders are as important as shareholders.
Right.
And, you know, Larry Fink said that 2 years ago. That's now the big buzzword. And it's now, you know, the community is important. The employees are important. The general society is important. That's why there's a lot of consternation now with what's going on in this world, because CEOs are sitting there saying, it's not enough just to put a black square on Instagram. What are we actually doing to improve the lives of all our employees? So actions, doing, are part of a movement. A movement is not about surface. A movement is about actions, about specific programs and actions in order to improve things. I'll pass it back to Ali. This is a perfect transition to your third point.
And by the way, I say kudos to you guys, because you didn't just stop with the future. You know, the upside is the limitless upside. Use your imagination. You actually kind of anchored it into a prescriptive how and where to act. What do you do about it? Because I think, to your point, Scott, this has to be about action. This has to be about actual movement. Otherwise, how do you even install an inkling of change?
I mean, just before you go into this point, Ali, in the Purpose Power Index, there's a very well-established athletic shoe brand that actually is way down on the list. And the reason is because I think their actions don't live up to their hype, to their advertising. Their advertising is all about supporting, you know, equality in athletics and certain celebrities, certain well-known athletes. But their actions, you know, the general population has, I believe, 13% are African American. They've got less than 8% are vice presidents in that company are African American. Why is it that they're not, their actions are not living up to their words? So under scrutiny, I think there's a lot of criticism around organizations that don't walk the talk. Anyway, I'll pass it over to you, Ali.
Yeah, that's a huge point, and this is really a chance to not just rethink your messaging or your philanthropic efforts, but to reframe your business in important ways. And we've got sort of 3 big categories that we're thinking through for this. We think about reframing capabilities, reframing operations, and reframing relationships. All of those are really significant ways that companies operate. So we understand we're not talking about trivial things here. These are very large undertakings. But a moment like this opens up that door to think through that. So to give a few quick examples for reframing capabilities, this is what we saw early in the pandemic. We saw brands like Ford and Dyson and many others redeploying factory lines to make ventilators. We saw clothing retailers like Nike and The Gap redirecting their production to make protective gear like gowns and face shields. So companies that, and those are obviously large firms, were able to pivot and saw a need and discovered that some of their capabilities, the underlying means of production that they had, could be repurposed and redirected. And the beautiful thing about those adventures, and you know, this is going to play out over the next 1, 3, 5 years, is that you may be contributing meaningfully in the near term, but once you open that aperture on what your business can do, it may never return to its original size. There's really a sense in which once you've taken that step, you've discovered new ways of doing things, you have new partners, you've formed new alliances, you've inspired new people. And we believe there's fundamentally no way that business is going to go back to the original size. Now, business as usual will return, but something has changed. And that was an experience that company, the people that work in those factories had, that doesn't get undone or unremembered.
I think I cannot emphasize and agree with that point strongly enough. And I never thought about it that way, but I think there's something quite brilliant about this idea of you can never go back. You can never go back to the old way. That's how you know you're on purpose, right? You're on, we always used to say on brand, but this is on purpose, I guess pun intended, right? This has to be deliberate, on purpose, but it also has to be something that says, how lost were we before?
Yeah.
What the hell were we doing? And now we have that sense of meaning. It is the North Star, going back to your analogy, Scott, with respect to rudders and headwinds and tailwinds. Now you have a North Star to guide you towards the future in these turbulent, stormy waters of change.
And you also have that experience of exhilaration, right? Like if you've worked in that factory and you've just created ventilators for community hospitals that needed them, and think what that felt like to the people working there, and think about how they will then, what they've attached to their own company, to their employer, and what they will expect. It's a really fascinating shift, and time will tell how it plays out.
I think to your fourth point, though, the key thing is, brand purpose without activation is bullshit. It's BS. So, I mean, we call it a toothless purpose strategy. It doesn't do anything. It sits in a frame behind the CEO's desk or the CMO or whatever. But unless you actually can turn it into actions and behaviors and turn it into, there was another article written in the Harvard Business Review by Charles Danaraj, who's our co-author in this article that we're talking about now. And his article was put purpose at the core of your strategy. And he looked at 4 companies that had done that and had grown significantly. And we're not talking about on the periphery in marketing or even in HR. He was talking about it in the core of the business strategy and how those organizations had had a tremendous growth spurt and transformation as a result of doing that. Because it really solves a lot of the issues that leadership are trying to solve for, which are, moving from product to the customer. There's a lot of buzzwords around. I mean, there's a lot of buzz around purpose as well, of course. But, CEOs are, how can we move our company from the product to close to the customer? Well, purpose can let you do that because you're really focusing on what's relevant to the consumer and the human. Actually, forget about the customer. It's the human being. It's the human who works in your organization, the human who buys from you, the human who invests in you. So it is really a business strategy. And that's exciting for Ali and I, because to us, that's the future. And we think that advertising is the past. And that's why we're focusing on this as a Strawberry Frog.
Well, if you are wanting to learn more about cultural movement, there's no firm better, no doubt, than Strawberry Frog to help take you on this journey and steer you on the ship. And of course, I am the admiral at HMS Beagle, so I appreciate all of the analogies as well. If you need another ship in the Armada, I'm happy to ride in your wake. But we're actually going to be moving over now to the Zoom after show, and I think I'm really glad that you guys are going to talk a little bit about this, because I think part of the action is, we talk about customers and environment and we forget about the all-powerful and vital employee and what they must be going through during these times. So we're going to talk about mental health amongst employees in the Zoom after show, and all you have to do is go to bit.ly/CoronaTV after show. I'm going to give you guys the final word, any final words to share. But before I do, sometimes I ask my guests if they would pay it forward and recommend a guest on the show. And then I saw on your book that that Guy Kawasaki wrote the foreword or an endorsement. And for some reason, we've always swum in different circles. So if you would, you can say yes now, and you never have to follow through. No one will ever know. But would you be so kind as to maybe make an introduction to Guy and see if he'd come on the show, Scott?
Sure, absolutely. I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
There's a few of those guys that I think I'd be happy to introduce you. Actually, there's a wonderful person. You know, you were talking before about culture as being this sort of a ethereal idea, very hard to kind of wrap your arms around it. I think we're moving into a time when a lot of these words that have not really been in the lexicon of CEOs are starting to move into the lexicon. So there's an extraordinary woman, her name is Pauline Brown, who was the chairman of LVMH. And then she's been a professor at Harvard at the business school. And now she's going to be starting at the business school at Columbia. She wrote a book last year called Aesthetic Intelligence. And it was written as a business book for CEOs. And in order to understand the importance of aesthetics, which I think is fascinating. Because if you think about it, again, aesthetics are a bit like culture. Hard to wrap your arms around. You know, most CEOs bought their suits at Brooks Brothers or got their furniture from their Restoration Hardware. No offense, it's a great brand. I'm just saying that, you know, there's a room for education in these areas, culture, aesthetics. She would be an extraordinary guest on the show.
Well, that would be amazing. And, you know, it's part of just building out this network and this community. But today, my only focus is on Ali and Scott. Thank you guys for coming in and, you know, sharing some really deep, profound insights on purpose, taking it from lip service and superficial understanding to something that really is deeper and more long lasting. And I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation in the Zoom After Show. So thank you, guys.
Thanks for having us.
One last bit, if I may, before we go
to
end.
You may.
So because of coronavirus, you know, we hold a intern program every year. This year we had like 750 applications, and we weren't able to hold the intern program because of coronavirus, because we're actually, Ali and I, despite this call, actually are not in the same room. We haven't sat together in the same room since March, beginning of March.
Crazy.
And we're all working remotely. So we had to unfortunately postpone our intern program. However, Ali and I will be with a couple other Strawberry Frog members holding a half-day masterclass, a free intern masterclass for all students and interns. If you have any that are listening, they're very welcome to register. There's 2,000 spots on, if you go to our website, under tadpoles, you'll see the link. So if you want any interns or students, you know, you're very welcome to join Ali and I in July. I can't remember, the 16th, I think, of July.
Or 19th.
19th. But it's all on our website, strawberryfrog.com. Tadpoles. The program is there. You can register and join the webinar.
That's awesome. And I thank you. Amy Rika thanks you. David Libby thanks you as well. Let's continue the conversation in the Zoom After Show. And thank you again, guys, for coming in.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Bye.